Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here today on the occasion of this distinguished panel, Southern Gas Corridor and Gas Fundamentals in the Wider Region. And we've got renowned, experienced speakers I would like to introduce before starting the panel quickly. Professor Kostas Andriosopoulos from the Hellenic Association for Energy Economics, the founding president actually, which was founded when I was IAEA president. It was a great pleasure for me and honor to attend the inaugural event there in Athens. Professor Andriosopoulos is professor at Alba Graduate Business School, director of the Hellenic Energy Center there, and the CEO of Aqua Energy. Would you like to introduce yourself very briefly?
Thank you, Durgan, for the kind words. Thank you, first of all, for the collaboration that we had, the nice collaboration over the years. As you said, it's already 11 years since the association was established. And for hosting us and for arranging this roundtable. Thank you for Angelos and S&P Global for hosting us in the nice event. It's part of that nice event and have this room discussion today. Myself, I'm an academic as well in the energy economics business. I have been establishing a center in London for a number of years, 10 years, and then I moved to Athens. I started from the gas business, so I have been the vice chairman of the Public Gas Corporation, which is a national entity in Greece for 2 times. I did 2 terms. Recent one was by 2022 that I stepped down. And I have been, from a family perspective as well, and the CEO of Aqua Energy, which is a French IPP, independent power producer, working on the renewable energy front, investing in renewable technologies from wind, solar, and BESS primarily. So we have been speaking and both teaching, investing, and speaking about the energy transition for a number of years, and I think that we are living into quite interesting times these days. And as part of this nice venue, it will be interesting to discuss mostly the gas perspective as we have it in our panel, I guess, in our discussion here, what is going on with the flows of gas, with the flows of energy, especially because of the war, because of sanctions, because of potentially lifting sanctions, new LNG volumes coming in as well, and terminals that are needed, and I think that will be the basis of our discussion today.
That's right. Thank you very much, Kostas. Our next panelist is Mr. Ümit Ergüner. He is the senior partner of Ergüner Bilgen Üçer Attorney Partnership, which he co-founded in 1989, which is among the leading law firms today in Turkey, also specializing in energy issues. Would you please briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thanks to S&P for organizing this event. I'm the senior partner of Ergüner Bilgen Üçer law firm in Istanbul. This is our 37th year as a law firm in Turkey, and in terms of my own experience, I have more than 4 decades of bar membership and legal experience. I've practiced in many different areas of law. In the recent years, I'm increasingly focusing on oil and gas, energy, in all walks of energy life.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And our third speaker today is from S&P Global Energy. And this again, I would like to thank S&P Global Energy for supporting our event today, for providing the room in collaboration with the Istanbul Market Briefing, for opening up the market briefing to our members as well. Thank you very much. So Anna Galtsova is the Senior Director actually for Gas, Power and Energy Futures at S&P Global. And Anna, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be part of such a distinguished panel. I'm humbled and honored to be one of the panelists and speakers. Happy to share S&P perspective and learn from you along. So I am predominantly gas analyst, so this is the topic that's closest to me within the energy fuels. And I've been dealing with gas markets for 20 years, and I've been lucky to expand my regional exposure over the years. So I started with Central Asia as the first market that I analyzed. Then I was the leading analyst, and I continue to be the leading analyst on Russia and Ukraine. But from 2022, I became part of the European gas team. And within European gas, I've been trying to deepen our knowledge on Central Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, and also a critically important market, Turkey, that we now planning to expand our coverage and deliverables. So really happy to be here. Let's begin.
Yes, thank you, Anna. So first of all, let me note that we have a small group, a roundtable group, so you're all welcome to jump in, ask questions, so that we have this more interactive type of panel. Essentially, I'm planning to focus on the three aspects: pipelines, then upstream, and then downstream, the demand side, EU. Have questions related to all three aspects, to all speakers from their particular expertise point of view. And I would like to focus on expanding the capacity of the Southern Gas Corridor, because we're talking about this particularly in Turkey, the TANAP, Trans-Anatolian project. Capacity can be doubled easily without constructing a second pipeline, with the additional investment of compressor stations from 16 BCM currently operational to 31 BCM. Similarly, the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, I looked it up on the website of the operator. It can be increased from 10 BCM annually to 20 BCM, it says, based on the current pipeline diameters. Then comes the third pillar, it's the South Caucasus pipeline. Current operational capacity 24 BCM, but it says total capacity may be expanded further to 34 BCM if needed. There are already two pipelines, parallel pipelines there, 42 and 48 inches. So my understanding is that there is also at the South Caucasus part the possibility to increase capacity without an additional pipeline, but then by 10 BCM only. Not enough really to double TANAP's capacity in that sense. Well, I'd like to start with Kostas. And Kostas, you didn't really mention, but you're also the former vice chairman of DEPA, the Hellenic Public Gas Company. So you've got extensive field experience, and you're aware of the investment needs and financial challenges. So when we're talking about doubling the capacity, even without a new pipeline section, what investment size are we really talking about, and the finance of this, is it comparable for the three sections, the investment, and how is the financing gonna happen? Equity or loan, is it a challenge to get it financed from the private sector?
Okay, I think you set the scene nicely. First of all, the whole chain, technically speaking, can almost double its capacity, as you correctly said. Even for the compression stations, even though there is no technical need for a second pipeline, first of all, this makes things much easier, economically speaking, and also from a time perspective, licensing-wise, all of the hard stuff that a new cross-border pipeline requires. So it is much easier to, first of all, go into the decision-making process of getting an FID for such an increase in the volumes, in the existing infrastructure. There are a couple of challenges. One is, okay, the main challenge for me would be the resource of natural gas, whether the commitment can be there for long-term capacities to be delivered from BP and SOCAR from the Sakdenis field to the end customers. On top of that, we need to identify who the end customers are. When the pipeline was built at the very beginning, it was mostly built with the premise that, as you correctly pointed out, 10 BCM are going to Europe. From this 10 BCM, almost 9 are going to Italy. So one stays, and the DEPA has the 1 BCM contract. 6 are staying with Turkey. Maybe now we see that Turkey has more needs, so maybe TANAP can act independently in terms of FID, in terms of any increasing of capacity, compared to what's happening with Europe and the TAP part. For the reason also that we have to see the macro environment, we need to see what is the competition there. We have LNG terminals that are already put in place. Alexandroupolis terminal is already operating. There are discussions, I'm not saying that we are close to FID yet, but there are discussions for either a second FSRU in Alexandroupolis, or let's call it a second FSRU in Greece, because there are a lot of discussions. There are 3 more projects that are being competing with one another. Then there is an FSRU in Croatia that is being discussed. There is an FSRU, there are 3 FSRUs already, 3 terminals in Turkey. So we have also a lot of competition coming from LNG. And as one of the pillars of the discussion is demand from Europe, and relating to that, so maybe the driver for what you were asking is not going to be Italy this time or Europe, it could be only Turkey. So this is another point that we have to see, how maybe this volume can be increased, but not as a doubling of the capacity for the whole pipeline, but possibly some volumes to stay until the Turkish border.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask on the legal situation, but before that, I'd like to continue with Anna, because she is also experienced in the practical field. Building upon what Kostas said, do you agree, do you see it similarly?
Yeah, I fully agree with all the arguments put forward. It is true that the overall investment needs for the expansion of the 3 pipelines together are not that overwhelmingly big. We estimated combined $3.5 billion. For such a long route, it's really not that much. The complication of the issue is that, first of all, there are 3 pipelines and the different set of shareholders on each of the pipelines. So you do need, for a full expansion of the southern corridor all the way to Italy, you do need the alignment on all of the shareholders across the board. There's only BP that actually participates in all 3 of them. Yeah, and then we will discuss, I think, in the future questions that, what are the complications with demand? And I, as an outside, as an external expert, I do have an opportunity to speak with consumers in Greece, but also consumers in Italy, and also the shareholders, like Enagas, the shareholder of the, and Fluxus, the shareholder in TAP. So they all analyze the market, and they are skeptical about the future growth of demand in Europe. In fact, it's unlikely to be growing but declining. And they are analyzing the costs of the competitors. So that's absolutely true. Turkey does stand out as a market in Europe, as the only market, well, with few exceptions, but I mean, Poland is also the market that's growing. But Turkey is the fastest growing market in the current circumstances. Therefore, Turkey will need more additional supply from all of the sources available, in fact. Therefore, it is true that Turkey, as a market, does look most interesting among all of the current off-takers of the Azerbaijani volumes. TAP already is working above the capacity. They made some adjustments to the compressor stations, and TAP is already, well, the actual supply of Azerbaijani gas to Europe is actually, it's 12.3 BCM, so it's 2 BCM plus 2.3 BCM higher than the capacity of TAP already now. The additional volumes are sold on spot to Italy and to other players. So it's already actually operating higher than the capacity. But obviously, if you want to push more, like 5 BCM, that would be the compressor station have to be upgraded. So with TANAP, I think indeed it's the interesting, with Turkey, In fact, it's an interesting case where you only need to expand the South Caucasus pipeline, which I think is much more plausible and reasonable because you have the market that's hungry. I think interesting case here is that I don't know, maybe the legal aspect is maybe the most interesting one. So the shareholders of South Caucasus, they until recently included as two black sheep in terms of shareholders. There was Lukoil that exited the project, and there is Nikko, the Iranian company. It doesn't mean that it's blocking the decision on the expansion. However, it makes it difficult for all of the shareholders to commit the capital. Whether the rest of the shareholders are interested in covering for the Iranian part of the bid, it's a bit unclear to me. So maybe this is something in the legal sphere that we can...
Exactly. Now you come in, directly to the legal sphere with all the shareholders that need to be aligned. This brings in new merger acquisitions, maybe other issues. Those who are blocking, what's going to happen with them? How is this going to be resolved contract-wise, legally, right? And this is your experience. And actually, Ergün Üçer also worked for TANAP, right? Is very experienced in the south, the gas corridor, in particular. Please.
Well, thank you. I was actually very privileged to be part of the design team which did the legal architecture of Bakü-Tbilisi oil pipelines. And I was the only Turkish lawyer on that team. And that structure also benefited the Shah Deniz 1, which with additional instruments became an available project at the time. I'm talking about from 96 to 99, December 99 when it was signed with BTC. And BTC created the legal architecture, which is the prime example of any multi-country pipeline project. When we talk about Southern Gas Corridor, actually we are talking about three different systems. The South Caucasus pipeline, the SCP, TANAP, and then the Adriatic pipeline. And they have different legal structures. Actually, the SCP includes a number of bilateral arrangements between Azerbaijan and Georgia. But in addition to that, a number of government to private sector project company arrangements, project company arrangements. There are shippers, upstream providers, transporters involved. When we talk about a corridor, actually, when we talk about a pipeline, we are not only talking about the pipeline, the steel material itself. We are talking about compression stations, we are talking about metering stations, we are talking about the management of pressure in the pipeline. We are talking about a number of interconnectors, and all of these involve a number of different legal instruments to make the pipeline. TANAP is a bilateral arrangement, although it only crosses the territory of Turkey, as the supplier is Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan signed the bilateral arrangement with the Turkish government. So it's an intergovernmental agreement attached to which, or appended to which, is the post-government agreement. That structure we created for BTC specifically, and in the case of BTC, there is one unified international agreement, and under that unified international agreement, each country signed a post-government agreement with the project company. That's a unique structure. And that unique structure we can see in the Adriatic pipeline, because it's also a three-party, three-country arrangement in the case of the Adriatic pipeline. But from a legal point of view, the Adriatic pipeline is a bit more complicated because we have EU involved. All the regulations, tariffs, price allocations, competition issues, that the EU legal framework comes up with are relevant. So when we talk about a corridor and doubling the capacity of gas that would go through that corridor, we have to also think about all these moving legal instruments that are involved. If the parties will remain the same, if the shippers will be the same, if the upstream providers, producers will not change, then there won't be a need to amend the underlying legal instruments. But I'm not talking about slight changes, but major changes will definitely necessitate amendments to the existing legal instruments, and those amendments will have to be doubled with the implementation agreements. So we're talking about a very complex legal infrastructure that feeds the project. Bankability is also a major issue for the upstream investors, for the transporters, shippers, all these mechanical facility providers. To make investments, they have to see light at the end of the tunnel. And the light will come from the European markets. And we are at a point talking about Europe's constantly reduction of its natural gas intake. And that reduction may continue. The capacity increase in the southern gas corridor makes sense only because there's this increasing pressure on the EU countries to reduce their imports from Russia. In a matter of 4 or 5 years, the imports from Russia, in terms of the European Union intake, the share of the Russians came down from 45% to something like 12%. And by the end of 27, I guess, first the LNG will be zeroed, and then the natural gas intake from Russia will be zero. So there is room for increase in southern gas corridor capacity, but that increase should also take into consideration the European Union energy policies.
That's right. I was going to ask about that, particularly on the demand side, because there's even fossil fuel phase out due to climate concerns,
Absolutely.
essentially.
Those are part of the policies I'm talking about.
Yes, yes, that's very true. We will get back to that, but now I'm going to go for the upstream part, which you also mentioned, and about the investment decision that will be affected actually by this policy as well. But I read last night there is this final investment decision for the Shah Deniz. The Shah Deniz produced last year 27 BCM. And then I read that on the Shah Deniz Consortium website that the final investment decision for the Shah Deniz compression project was given in June 25. So last year, June, and then this will bring an additional 50 BCM, I read. So if this is true what I read, it's on the website, then it sounds like too good to be true, then to get over with this expansion $3.5 billion is inevitable in my opinion. But Anna, you're the expert on this, in this region, in this part of the world. So what do you say about the upstream?
So it's a prolific basin. No question there is a lot of resource. However, resource and production are two different things. So Shah Deniz is one of the unique fields. It's a massive field with obviously produces that much gas on plateau. So there are two phases ongoing. And the recompression project, what essentially, when it is done, the recompression project usually targets the low pressure gas. So you need to compress more in order to withdraw the remaining reserves in the field. When it is done, when the field is actually approaching the decline phase. Therefore, the 50, how can you explain the 50 BCM? I think it's additional volume over the years that will be extracted from the field
It's not annual volume.
It's not annual.
Okay,
It
okay.
cannot be annual volume.
So, okay.
The 50 BCM is the sum up of the future periods, or the gas that
I
you
see.
wouldn't extract if you didn't employ the recompression.
That makes sense, because when I read the 50 BCM additional, I was like, can this be true? That makes sense,
Right.
yeah.
Can you produce additional 20 BCM in Azerbaijan? Yes, you can. There are lots of smaller projects around. The problem is that you have to backfill the decline in Shangri-Nis and then produce on top another, in order to have a production in Azerbaijan go by another 10 BCM, you have to solve two things. You have to backfill Shangri-Nis, the decline of the field, and then you have to add on top. So that becomes a problem. Because the basing itself is challenging, it's prolific, but it's a challenging production. It's costly by international standards. If let's say, all of that basing was somewhere on the Gulf Coast in Mexico, Gulf Coast in the Middle East, or in the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, that would have been easier, but then you have the transportation lag. That's the problem. So the cost of production is higher by normal standards, and it is complicated by the fact that there is a long transportation lag. When you sum this together, Southern Corridor gas, when it arrives to Europe, is competitive at prices, let's say, $8, $8.5, $9 per MMBTU. Why it's difficult to take an investment decision right now? Because we expect the prices to be much lower. That's the problem.
Through LNG, you mean?
Yes, through the surplus of LNG. We can argue that, we've been expecting this wave to come for years, but then something happened in 2022, something happened in 2026, and it's arguable that the world is going to be unstable. So that's the problem with the upstream. Enough resources, but expensive, difficult to produce. Therefore, you need commitment on the buyer side to invest a lot of $1 billion.
This also supports what Ümit Bey said. You need the commitment on the buyer side, and you are the buyer side.
Yes, the first phase, the pipeline that exists now, was based on the commitment of 20-year-long contracts that they have also oil indexation, so maybe the prices that the first buyers are paying is not as low as we are saying. So there is an aspect of how do you enable that? So are they going to invest this €3 billion on the premise that you have short to medium term contracts? Because the LNG producers in the US are actually taking these kind of decisions today as we speak, like Cheniere, for example. Cheniere, to build the first infrastructure, needed the long-term commitments, but now they are taking FIDs on 5-year contracts, on spot, because the market trusts that they will sell their LNG, and they have already a lot of other infrastructure in place that was paid by the long-term investors, and now they can afford to take the risk on the market, which, it's always a market issue, and I insist on that, on the LNG pressure, as Anna also said, that is coming from the US, because what they call the south, the vertical corridor, from Greece to Ukraine, or the other routes that are coming from Poland or Lithuania, to bring the LNG and to bring gas even to Ukraine, because that's what we kind of see, that there might be another demand center there instead of Europe itself, because Europe needs to replace some volumes, but the future of gas is also under question mark. So, these 20-year-long contracts are not going to be there, and I think that the project promoters should take the risk to go to the banks with a different mindset from what they have done in the first phase of the pipeline. And I strongly believe that we could increase the compression capacity, and probably this could take FID. But maybe not, as I mentioned earlier, betting on Italian, German or Greek buyers on a long-term perspective, because the portfolios of all of these buyers are mixed already at the moment, and nobody really knows what to do next, and there is a huge hesitation for long-term commitments. That's why all the auctions that are taking place for the vertical gas corridor have been failed. so far, have been failing. And there is one in July, probably because of the Greek government, we may have a push from DEPA to participate. They are participating in Bulgar gas, but without having clear visibility what to do with the gas leakage. So
Yes.
it's not an easy question, obviously, and you know that it connects with the green agenda of the European Union as well on top, which is complicating things even further for someone to take these long-term commitments. Again, the final point on the upstream, even Sanctenis 2 got the FID because BP saw an opportunity in gas liquids, not even for the gas. If they didn't have the gas liquids to support the upstream, we wouldn't have the tap in the canal. Because the money actually was being paid by this product. So there is a healthy market now. I honestly, on the upstream side, I'm more optimistic, to be honest, than pessimistic, and I believe that BP, having limitations on access on other parts of the world that they used to be until recently, that they were forced to go out, I think that they will focus on countries and on regions that they have already operations and they have the opportunity with marginal investment to get more money out of it. So I am betting that they will commit on the investment, they will push forward on this, and somehow this capacity will increase for sure until the Greek borders.
But even if the FID is there, it will take years, right, to get the gas online. 5 to 6 years, what's the timeline there?
I think it
Less?
could be less.
Could be less.
Technically speaking, it would be less. But if it's more on the legal front, if we have changes on the negotiations and the legal form and everything, it could be taking even more than
So,
the original structure actually foresaw expansion. So it created room for expansion
Yes.
within the legal documents. But as we talked about it, the expansion also is dependent on the market conditions in the European Union. You talked about LNG and other sources. Obviously, the European Union's regulatory environment encourages diversification. You don't have to be reliant on one source and create a monopoly. That would have to deal with the competition requirements of the EU. So LNG is there, Norwegian gas is there, renewables are there, and we see more and more nuclear and small modular reactors will also come into the scene, reducing dependency on natural gas. And not only dependency on natural gas, but also the quality of natural gas also will be questioned. The methane percentage in natural gas will also have to meet the requirements of decarbonization in Europe. And all these issues are moving together targets that have to be dealt with in detail from a legal point of view as well.
and another thing, the gas directive also requires unbundling. So BP operates the Shahtinis field, also operates the South Caucasus pipeline, and also has a share in Tana. Probably not an issue up to now because Turkey is not an EU member. But once Turkey becomes an EU member, it will be an issue, right? They cannot have a share in TAP, BP. Is that true?
It's okay when you have to offer third-party access.
You have to offer.
But you can think of a scenario where Turkey is part of the EU, where Turkey also expands massively its own production, and then the TAP would have to offer third-party access to Turkish production. It is possible, yeah, but for that, a lot of things need to happen. First of all, Turkey becomes part of the EU, and Turkey starts to produce so much gas that it covers domestic consumption and export.
That's what we hope for.
Yes,
We have
yes,
Black Sea gas as well.
Positive thinking does miracles.
Yes. So let's then continue with that. We're already at talking about the demand sides and the opportunities and challenges for the EU. On the one hand, we have the climate agenda. On the other, with the fossil fuel phase out long term. On the other hand, there are many.
Maybe on the upstream, I would add an interesting point here because. I think there is a limitation on the upstream side because there's, I mean, all of the other fields in Azerbaijan are simply smaller, but you have Turkmenistan across the board, across the Caspian Sea. And there is actually a Block 1 PSA with Petronas that is producing and injecting back into the field the associated petroleum gas, and the volume of that is 5-6 BCM. If you add that volume through a short connection to the infrastructure of Shardiniz or ACG, you instantly, permanently have a solid supply of 5 to 6 BCM a year, and then on the back of additional smaller additions in Azerbaijan, plus this 5-6 BCM from Turkmenistan, with a very short connection across the Caspian Sea, all of a sudden you do have enough resource to support the higher production. That is something that a lot of people overlook because they always think about Trans-Caspian as such a huge project that would involve significant resources from Galkanish, and Galkanish is another example of a super resource-rich country where production is very challenging. It's not like Turkmenistan is able to ramp up production overnight. However, there is something that's already there, and this is the PSA-1, Block 1. And I think when we're talking about the supply for the Southern Gas Corridor, this is something that we really have to think about. There are key blocks here. First of all, Turkmenistan is actually not that interested in a small link like that. It's a PSA, so it's a different regulation regime, right? So it may be the case that Turkmenistan is not benefiting as much as they would like. And then Azerbaijan, in this way, is like, maybe Turkmenistan is actually competing with this relatively small volumes with some of our additional production from Absheron, from ACG. However, there is a XRG, the Dubai, the company which is part of the ADNOC, which was then separated as a separate company, XRG. They are investing in the transportation in Azerbaijan, but they're in Absheron. They are looking at Turkmenistan, so they might be the company that actually brings this all together because they have the communication with all of the parties. So it's interesting that we are skeptical about Azerbaijan upstream potential, but at the same time, there's something right there at the table that might just help to have enough resources.
But this small link, the Trans-Caspian link, doesn't require any commitment or any approval from Iran or Russia, right? Is there any legal issue
I
there?
think, yeah, let's go to the legal. Yeah, you can look at the map, please, Block 1, and how close this thing is. And you build a pipeline which is relatively small, 5 to 7 BCM. I think it still requires the agreement between the states. Yeah. So that will be a problem, obviously, but who knows? I mean, this is not such a big volume, so you might be more successful.
I mean, intergovernmental agreement between Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan, or you need others involved?
This one only between the two.
Because it doesn't touch the Iranian water, it doesn't touch the Russian, so that's interesting.
So it also depends on the production sharing agreement that will underline the IGA. Obviously, we're talking about, in terms of greater Caspian region, we're only talking about Shardiniz, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, but given the situation in the Gulf, you never know what will happen there. They're not able to take their LNG out of the Hormuz Strait. So what if they want to join the new party here through another pipeline?
XRG is actively investing in gas business in general. It's a part of the overall push of the Gulf states to diversify into gas. It's interesting strategic move of the Gulf states that we are witnessing in the region in Central Asia.
And gas prices have increased with the Hormuz closing, but now fall, there's a huge volatility. And when they fall, all those pipeline investments and the pipeline gas may not be competitive anymore. What's the trade-off? I mean, you just mentioned the demand side is not willing to have long-term contracts anymore, no take-or-pay contracts anymore. But then there is this LNG alternative, which is very flexible and also has become competitive. So how do you see the trade-off between LNG and pipeline gas?
It's not an easy answer, but let me. I mean, you mentioned about price. Okay, the price levels are not a decision-making factor for pipelines like this. I mean, it's mostly the supply and demand fundamentals rather than the price itself. Because the price, obviously, nobody can understand what the price will be for the next 20 years. It's always indexed, one way or the other. It used to be oil indexed, now a lot of TTF going into play. All the LNG coming from the US is a lot of Henry Hub indexed as well, and we will see a flat over the past 15 years. Prices are lower than benchmark figure, let's say $3 per MMBTU. So it makes sense to diversify also with this pricing mechanism. So fundamentals on supply and demand. Are we going to be requiring enough gas also in Europe? Where are we going to be getting this gas from? The elephant in the room is, yes, we understand that we are not going to go into the previous relationship with Russia tomorrow, but when you have existing infrastructure that takes decades, takes a lot of billions to build, and it's sitting there idle, if there is a change in regime, if X, Y, Z, if the relationship, recovers between Europe and Russia, are we going to see some volumes? Because when we're saying 10% is 45 BCM. It's your full capacity pipeline that we were discussing. Is this volume going to hit Europe again? If yes, and if this happens in 5 years from now, I'm not saying tomorrow, in 5 years from now, you are going to be probably at the beginning of the inauguration of the additional volume of the pipeline we were mentioning before. So these volumes will hit probably at a discount. And if the commitment is not there, as we said, on the long-term basis, on a take-or-pay basis, which I find very difficult for companies on the other side to commit today, because LNG gives them the flexibility not to do so, it makes these kind of projects even more difficult. You need a project promoter that will take the risk, and usually this is in the form of a state-owned company. What Anna said, ADNOC could make the change here if they want to somehow see themselves playing their role differently. But we're talking about ADNOC and the UAE, that they have a regasification terminal bringing US LNG. So this is the world that we live in. We have an LNG terminal in the UAE where you have the biggest gas field of the world right next to them. So everything can happen.
That's a very good point.
UAE consumes a lot of gas from this field, by the way. It's interesting that one of the landmark agreements between Qatar and UAE and Oman, that there is the only pipeline from Qatar goes to UAE and Oman. And you would be astonished at how much gas these states are consuming compared to the size of the population of these countries. They are a super gasified economy. 99% of the energy balance is gasified. It's for the domestic consumption, and a lot of it is for water desalination. It's, so UAE, a small country which consumes astonishingly 90 BCM of gas. It's hard to believe, but it is the feature of the region. So UAE needs gas from Qatar, regasification from regas facility to import LNG, because they can never be sure that the flow from Qatar will be, they will have to renew the agreement soon.
This is a security of supply element that and security of supply also for Europe. The backbone of it is the Azeri gas and the fact of the existence of this pipeline, but in Europe then you have many actors, many companies, many states, that they need to have one voice and one decision-making approach on a timely manner. Because if we're waiting for disalignment for many years to come, then we don't have a project. Whereas in the case of the UAE, it's one man, one person, one
decision-making process.
Decision-making approach. So this makes it easier.
You want to make an addition?
The chairman of the International Energy Agency, Fatih Birol, is a Turkish citizen. And he was the keynote speaker the other day at the TUSIAD gathering in Istanbul. And his main remark about the Gulf is that the base is broken, nothing will be the same again. Gulf is providing 20% of the energy natural gas supply of the world, and even if there seems to be peace at the time, the trust is not there, the risk premium will be there for a long time to stay, which will also have an impact on the price of LNG, which probably cannot be taken out from the Hormuz Strait if the peace arrangements cannot be met. So there will be a desire to take that natural gas out of that area, and may have to be through another brand new pipeline, which can be tied into the existing corridor or may create its own corridor, but gas will be needed. And it's not only going to be needed in Europe. Georgia, Turkey also needs it, and other countries in the region will need it. Syria will be rebuilt, they will need it. And so we're talking about a totally new ballgame that's in the horizon.
That's right. Yes.
Can I also make a point?
Sure.
If you don't mind. Ömer Korkmaz, TANAP Project and Modification Director. So, first of all, we are here, more than 20 experts, and even our mind is also confused because there are many aspects of these fight to taking the final investment decision in such projects. I was working for Potash for 18 years, and starting from 19 to 2010, it took more than 20 years to take a decision for these. I was also a part of the Nabucco projects at that time. So from 19 to 2013, it takes 23 years to take a final decision for investment of the TANAP project. South is there, which is the, is the most critical and most important part of the Southern gas corridor. So technically, I think we don't have any problems, technically, because the shareholder of the TANAP, as BP, SOCAR, and Potash, took the risk and and the capacity of the pipeline, as you all said, is more than 21 billion meter cube per year. Now we are transporting 16 to 17 billion cubic meter to Turkey and to Europe. And we are ready. We can just put 2 compressors to make the increase from 16 to 22, for example. So we make all these designs, so we are ready. If this, of course, the shareholder take the decisions, it took maybe 2 to 3 years to make the additional compressor to, let's say, transport another 10, 15, 16 BCM to European or to Turkey or to Eastern European market. But I think the main problem is, as you all know, is there is no clear picture from the European side, from the demand side. So they are discussing. So one side is they are talking with the United States, the LNG parts, the pipelines. So the Russian crisis. So whether we get to increase the investment in the renewable parts. So the nuclear, back to the nuclear, back to the even the coal power plant. So there is many discussions over there. So from the supplier sides, I think they are also, they don't want to take the risk. They are maybe for the last 6 years they are seeking or they are asking a strong commitment from the demand side to make the investment from the upstream, but they didn't get a strong commitment from the European sides. So it is not easy to make okay, let's make an investment 50 to 10 million US dollar. Okay, maybe they will need gas, of course, which also are. It's clear that the European and the Turkey, the Georgian market, let's say the Eastern European countries they will need the gas. This is clear, but no party is taking the risk to make a new investment. So the supplier is asking the demand side. Demand is asking, okay, make the pipeline, we will get the gas. This is the only talking. So there is no, I think, from the European side, this is my personal view. This is not a ton of view, let's say. But my personal view is that there is no clear or there is no strong leadership to take these decisions.
If I may add something on what you said, because you said about the shareholder, you talked about BP. We have to say that BP also the past 3-4 years is not under a strong leadership itself either. So they have changed the CEO. They don't know exactly what they want to do with their business and how they want to tackle the energy transition.
Pipeline or the renewable.
So the number one reason why this is not happening is not EU, it's BP. And it's clear for me that is when BP comes together and they understand that they want to do this project, the capital at risk is not as massive. So the economics are very easy to tackle if you want to increase the capacity, even without the long-term commitment for me. The trading business, the upstream business, the investments is multi-billions a year. They have had a lot of losses, they have had a lot of stupid decisions that they have taken over the past few years. And now they are disinvesting in a number of places, so you can understand that the transformation of BP alone is so complex that before they understand what they want to do with the business, you will never have any sort of a decision here.
Yeah, I agree. And the BP also, there is no clear picture in the BP also.
If you ask me, everything else we're discussing is very nice, but 90% of the decision-making process in this is BP.
We should have had someone from BP, I think.
Yes,
That's
yes.
amazing. I had the opportunity to visit BP headquarters a couple of times in the last month, and I saw Melanie, and she has a very good reputation as a strong leader, like very pragmatic. No bullshit, I'm sorry. But this is exactly what she's described, and she comes from upstream. Like ExxonMobil is an excellent school of executives where, and I also been very lucky to visit BP office in Azerbaijan, and it's just alive there. It's just lively, and people are excited because they're hiring back people with geology background, engineers. Finally, I have to agree with you that that BP indeed was in a troubled situation for a long time, and now it looks like they're coming together and looking at their core business, at the oil and gas, what made BP that company. So it's interesting. So I maybe overlooked the importance, and now you've just highlighted how important this is.
So you basically agree with Kostas and think that there is a change at BP that could make this now...
I agree that the change of the environment in BP is definitely happening. I mean, I report to you that's true. And I see how the BP involvement, because it's actually indeed a very single part of the chain, how BP attitude and business behavior is indeed really important.
We have to also note that BP sold a 3% portion of its stake in TANAP to Apollo, a private equity company. They had 12% and 3% sold to Apollo. So that's also another factor to take into consideration in terms of BP.
But if BP does not come up with a decision, is it legally possible that, for example, Turkish Petroleum comes up, the Turkish Wealth Fund decides to invest? I'm just making up a scenario here. Is it legally possible? Because BP operates the field. BP is the legally representative there.
It's a business issue.
It's a business issue.
To invest in the compression station. Because it's one thing to invest on TANAP on the infrastructure, but then
not the pipeline. I'm talking about the upstream. About the Shah Deniz field.
Well, I mean, they're investing currently in ACG. That's the deep gas. So this is there. They took FID. It was a little bit delayed, but I mean, we've seen examples worse than that. They are we still don't know. So the estimates of additional gas demand is in the range of gas production, sorry, in the range of 3 to 5 BCM. So it's not massive, but it is significant. And potentially there may be third phase of Shah Deniz. It is potentially possible, so it will slow down the decline. We do have to understand that such a huge field like Shah Deniz that builds the basis of the production in the country, whatever happens with Shah Deniz is extremely important. We can talk about 15 other small projects, yet the Shah Deniz situation is going to be by far the most important.
Just to put a testimony here on the table, I wrote a book on the Southern Gas Corridor as well with Azerbaijan. It was sponsored by BP. We were talking with the executives of BP back then at the time, and you will see how strongly interested they were because they have already taken the FID for the project. Today, they are out. I mean, nobody sees them anymore. No? Pushing any agenda strongly on this, which means exactly this tomorrow, maybe we start seeing them again. If this is the case, I think that they may go ahead with
But that's right, even at our IAEA meetings, we used to have BP quite present. Nobody sees them anymore, that's right. Any other questions from the audience? From the round table? So we are at the end of the time, so maybe your final words. I think we have identified very good the challenges related to expanding the capacity. And even we come up with expectations and our maybe last words to policymakers, your final takeaway from the session maybe.
I think it's a very interesting project, and Europe needs to think about this in a completely different perspective from the security of supply. We all know that that different demand centers in the region learned their lesson recently through the extreme overdependence on single source of supply. For these or other reasons, Europe had to cope with the loss of the Russian supply, and it was severely dependent on Russia. Asian countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh had to cope with like 100% dependence on Qatar LNG. So our outlook for the European supply looks increasingly dependent on LNG, and not just LNG, US LNG, because it's the projects that are being built in the US, and then yes, they're flexible, yes, they're comfortable for the buyers. They also predominantly concentrated in the same geographical region, and they also fall victims of what is happening in the US politics. Therefore, I think Europe really needs to think about diversification and the cost of it. They are losing the demand side flexibility because of the decisions to decarbonize and use more renewables and phase out coal. They do need to have some flexibility on the supply side. They currently have very limited flexibility on both sides, and demand is still there for a little bit of time, but the supply side. So they do have to think about the pipeline project. Whatever happens with Russia in the future, it's not coming back at the scale of the past. Therefore, the alternative supply from different regions, from different projects, is a thinking of the security of supply. And it has some cost, always have. And I think this is one of the maybe key points that different European buyers will be strongly. We know that they're thinking about this. Everything that has happened in the past 5 years has learned that has taught us that unexpected things may happen.
If I add a last point on this, again, going back to the shareholders and some of the infrastructure that is in place, as was correctly pointed out, most of the infrastructure is already ready for plug-and-play solutions. On the Greek side, for example, because we have an alignment now of the shareholders, Senfluga, which is the consortium of the Spanish TSO, the Italian TSO, but most primarily driven from the Italian TSO, and the Belgian one, are both in both pipelines. We do have the compression stations that were required. There was a recent investment of hundreds of millions of euro that have been taken place into the backbone of the Greek transmission system that connects in two points with the TAP, the Trans-Adriatic Pipeline, that facilitates a little bit already the volumes that have been committed, but the plan is to be plug and play. It's already plug and play and ready. If the additional volumes come, then this can be given to the national system. It's not exactly like the TANAP. I'm not certain. I don't know if this kind of investment has been made with connections, the necessary connections with the national grid, as they have already taken place in Greece, because of the EU regulation as well. As we were saying, the third-party access was forcing also, in a sense, that, but it's not the regulation, it's the alignment of the stakeholders that they want to increase the business also on DESFA. DESFA is the national TSO that has other interests as well in the flows in the north, in the vertical gas corridor.
Thank you. Hamid Bey, you have the final word.
You originally asked us to talk about opportunities and challenges for EU and those who are participating in the Southern Gas Corridor pipeline systems. The opportunity is that during transition being during the time period the European Union will go towards decarbonization, there will still be need for natural gas. And that natural gas is going to be a replacement gas for Russian natural gas, which will no longer be available. So the opportunity for Europe is that there is this corridor available, and it can be expanded, and the legal instruments enable it to be expanded, and technically it can be expanded, and there is gas in the ground that can be developed and made available to the system. So that's the opportunity for Europe. During the transition period, they will find an energy source for themselves. An opportunity for the parties that create the corridor is that there is a market out there that they will be able to sell their gas to. But the challenges is the decarbonization goal is going to be a challenge that reduces predictability of the market intake going forward. European regulatory environment is going to be a challenge. Availability of downstream facilities is a challenge. Although in the case of TAP, we have seen that there was an increase of 1.2 BCM. So it was able to accommodate that type of increase. So there are opportunities and challenges, and the market needs to give green light to the upstream investors to move forward. And that signal is a bit ambiguous at the time.
Maybe with the energy security, supply security issue. In terms of decarbonization, I fully agree, but on the other hand, you see new coal power plants in Europe coming online, so this is...
they were called on wrong
yeah, nonsense.
In terms of lacking
so then gas is decarbonization itself, if you build a gas power plant instead of a coal-fired power plant. So thank you very much. We're out of time. Thank you very much, Anna, Costa, Sumit, for the great panel, and our attendees for attending.
Thank you.